I'm excited to be here today, and Jonathan mentioned testifying before Congress. It can not be a lot of fun, so I hope not to do that too many more times. But there's just tremendous enthusiasm for RPA in the federal government. I can't think of anything else that gets employees and the government as excited as they are now. If you thought about a scale of 1 to 10, you'd give enthusiasm a 10. But if you think about results, I think agencies are struggling to get results. And results are not at a 10 to 10, so 10 out of 10. So today, I want to talk to you a little bit about how you can get more results in your agencies, a bit about what we did at GSA, and also what we need to do across federal government. Before I start, I would just like to ask, I know we have a lot of government folks here and consultants supporting government, but how many of you are here today just to learn more about RPA and you're with an agency that's looking to get their first pilot going? Just raise your hand if that's the case. Okay. And how many of you are with an agency that's got at least one bot in production? Okay. And how many of you are with an agency that's got 10 bots or more in production? Okay, one person. Okay. I can't see what that is, but at GSA we have 14, by the way, but I want everybody to be able to raise their hand next year and say we've got 10 or 20 bots in production. And that's really the challenge ahead of us and what I want to talk a little more about today. The opportunity in the federal government is tremendous. I've got a quantification of that. I'll tell you a bit about the GSA story. We'll also talk about how you start this thing up and some of the keys to success, and also about evolving programs, and then a bit about what we need to do across federal government. So RPA is a huge game changer for the federal government. There's nothing else that we have in our toolkit that can do what RPA can do. And you think about the pressure we have in budgets, the additional work that is hitting all government employees. RPA is a solution, and it's a solution that employees are excited about it, so we have to think about how do we get it done. And Jonathan talked about the organizational capacity, so the shift from low to high value. I think the opportunity that is really out there, that a couple that really get missed, first is the process improvement opportunity. RPA is a chance to improve your processes. In addition, RPA is a chance to eliminate and reduce backlogs. So the process improvement opportunity, I can tell you that when we, in the CFO office at GSA, when we looked at processes we could automate, we had about a dozen, and we whittled it down to 3 or 4. And one of the ones we looked at closely, we discovered we could just immediately improve the process. The way we did it was we eliminated it. We didn't need to do it. And so a win for RPA. You could actually stop doing the process, and we thought we had to do it, and we no longer had to do it. So we stopped doing it. So that, and we also had a couple processes that when the IT organization heard that we were going to look at a bot, they said, hey, we can do something for you here pretty quickly. So another win for RPA. This effort led to an initiative where we decided to put RPA under a program we called Eliminate, Optimize, or Automate. So RPA is the automate portion, but the thinking was that if we have this process that we can eliminate, how many more are out there that we haven't looked at? So we started a program where we looked for processes we could eliminate, those that we could optimize, and those that we could automate. So process improvement became part of the equation. The shift from low to high value work, that's really the easiest way to measure the benefit RPA, because you measure it in terms of hours that you free up or can make available. There's been concern expressed about management controls. I actually think RPA has better management controls. When we had our first bot and we were testing it and we were struggling with getting the results to be accurate, someone said to me, well, maybe the bot has been doing it right and we've been doing it wrong. That wasn't the case, but RPA is actually an opportunity to have stronger management controls. So the eliminate, optimize, automate effort that the CFO office kicked off at GSA, and we looked at things that we could do in our organization, but also what we could do in with our partners, because in the finance organization, you require other organizations to do work, to process items, and you put a workload on them. So we looked across the board at half the agencies. So we've identified 230,000 hours of work that we could either eliminate, optimize, or automate. And about 60,000 are in the first two category, and 170,000 are in the third, the automate. So 230,000 hours. And we're in the process of implementing a lot of those. The eliminate things happen quickly. The automation is about a third or quarter of the way through. So when you think about the opportunity, there could be a way to quantify that using the 230,000 hours. And so I spent a lot of time in the private sector, and something that I was very fond of was back of the envelope estimates. So this is a back of the envelope estimate of the potential of RPA. So if you look at the 230,000 hours of the CFO office, and we really only looked about maybe half of GSA in terms of opportunities, but GSA has around 12,000 employees. If we've been able to come up with 230,000 hours across 12,000 employees, that's an average of 19 hours an employee. If you could do that across the 2 million employees in the federal government and come up with 19 hours, and this is 19 hours per year, and we did this identified this in a matter of months, that would be 38 million hours. If you just look at the out-of-pocket cost associated with that 38 million hours, it's 2.7 billion. So this is taking something that we've done in a little over a year at GSA and saying if we did something like that across federal government, it'd be worth 2.7 billion. So that says, what are we waiting for? If you have this kind of opportunity that is out there, we need to get moving. Another way to think about this is to simply look at how many hours your employees are working. So in a CFO organization, I think you can do 5 to 10% of organizational capacity. You can automate or eliminate that with a little bit of work and fairly easily. If we just set a goal of 3% across the civilian federal workplace, that would generate 112 million hours of work and $8 billion. So the potential is huge for us if we can get results on RPA. So what about the employees? What do they think about this? Well, employees at GSA actually want some of their work automated, and I think the important thing to think about when you think about this is RPA automates tasks and not jobs. When we think about automation, many people think about the auto industry and how a factory worker's job gets automated and the job gets eliminated. That's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is you have employees that have multiple tasks they're responsible for. And when you can automate some of them, you're moving them from an environment of data capture and data entry to data analysis. And employees want that. We hire the employees at a level so that they can do the high-level work that they need to do in their job. But then when they come in, they have to work with systems and pull data from different sources and input it in other systems, and they're not doing high-value work. So RPA is an opportunity to fix all that. And the employees actually want that, and it'll lead to higher employee engagement, productivity, satisfaction, higher customer satisfaction. So I actually think this is a huge opportunity for employees to do things that are more exciting and to do more of what they were actually hired for. So the GSA RPA program. So I'll just tell you that I had gone to conferences, not RPA conferences, but conferences where RPA was part of the discussion, and I'd be very excited, and I'd get back to my agency and think I need to do something, and I would do nothing. And you would just get back to your normal grind, your normal operations. So just a little over a year ago, January of 2018, I said, it's time. Let's see what we can do. So the CFO organization knew nothing about RPA. We never had a discussion with the IT organization. So the first thing I did was set a goal. I said, okay, 100 days, let's see if we can have a bot in production in 100 days. So that was the goal, and that drove everything. And so we started out with that as our model. And we wanted to just think about the investment, cross the finish line, deliver a bot. So this is the curve or the approach that we've taken in the CFO office for the RPA program evolution. So I wasn't big on an ROI calculation for RPA because we didn't know how long it would take, we didn't know how much it was going to cost, we didn't really know what the benefits were. So the approach initially was to manage the investment. Okay, start off and just try to get something simple, get a pilot out there, cross the finish line with a couple bots, and understand what it takes to do this, and manage the amount of investment, and then go from there. Our second phase is really building your expertise and building your capacity. So that first phase, I believe, was about 4 months. The second phase, we are working on now. We're probably between the second and third phase. The third phase is when you go after home run projects. So these are projects that have significant returns and are more complex. Once we did our first bot, and it took us about 4 months, we reached out to other parts of the organization. So we have a big business unit, the Public Building Services. It's about half of GSA's employees. We went to them, we went to the person heading up leasing, and we said, okay, they were interested in doing a bots, we helped them do bots. So after 4 months, we were helping other parts of GSA. Today, we're helping other CXOs do bots, and I'll tell you a little more about that. But the home run projects, when you start implementing them, you're going to see the economies of scale. And that first bot is going to cost you a lot more than the benefit. You're starting up the program, so the cost of that bot is going to be way above the benefit. But that will balance out over time, and your benefits will clearly exceed the cost if you manage your investment. So where are we today at GSA? We did the first bot in 4 months, so we missed the 100-day goal. It took us, I think, 120, 125 days. But we now have 14 bots that are in production. And the end of this fiscal year, we think we set a target, when we had 2 or 3 bots, we set a target of 25 for the end of this fiscal year. So I think we should be able to make that. It's important that you work well with your IT organization, but as you enter this world, you don't have to build a football stadium. I mean, there can be lots of discussions about the financing and the governance and things like that. Just get started, deliver some bots, learn how to do it, learn how to get 3 or 4 done, and then you can go from there. A lot of these bots hopefully will be for other parts of the organization. We're actually have started work with both our mission assurance and HR organization. So right now we are working with the Chico at GSA to reassess the process we use for hiring, and also to add bots to that process. So it's a huge opportunity, can make a difference. We've got some things in the clearance process and other paperwork exercises that we can automate, so there's tremendous potential. In the case of leasing, GSA has 11 regions, and they've all developed their own approach to how they administer leases, how they pay them. And if you just said, we want to pick a better process and we want you all to agree, that would be difficult. What we're doing is we're designing a better process, and we're going to put bots on top of that. So now you can go to any one of those regions and say, guess what, if you take on this process, you'll have something that's tremendously more efficient than what you're doing today, and it'll be standard process. So back to that process standardization and process improvement, huge opportunity. So if you're starting up an RPA program, I think there are a couple things that you need to pay attention to, and I've talked about a few of these already. The first is set an aggressive goal. When you get back to that slide with the pilot phase, if you've been in the pilot phase for more than 6 months, that's too long. You want to get out of that phase. If you've been there 9 months, that's too long. You want to move beyond that. So set a goal. Set an aggressive goal. An RPA champion in the organization is tremendously important. This is someone that knows and understands RPA, and sometimes I call that person an RPA evangelist. They go and get other parts of the organization excited about this. In addition to the champion, you need an executive that's going to push RPA in the agency. Third is select the right pilot. Don't get too complicated. Start with something simple. We started with some processes that were within CFO organization because those folks worked for me and we could quickly do the things we needed to do to understand the process, document it, and implement the bot. So pick something that's not too complicated, pilot that, and achieve some success. Think about process improvement. It's process improvement and automation. And you don't want to automate a bad process. This is a chance to optimize your process. And I'm not talking about a lengthy Six Sigma study. This is the kind of thing that if you pull the teams together in a matter of weeks, you can think about how to redesign the process. So huge opportunity there. One of the things that we did was, well, first of all, if you haven't done this before, get external expertise to help you, because you don't want to start from scratch. You need to understand how to do this. So get some external expertise, but also train in-house capabilities. So 2 or 3 months after we kicked off this program, we said, okay, we need some developers in-house. So we sent a note out. We had 50 people raise their hand and say, hey, I'd love to learn about this in the CFO organization. We picked 12, and we gave them some training. And they still continued doing the critical responsibilities of their other job, so they were part-time. So all the efforts you see with the 14 bots were not with any incremental employees. There were employees that were doing it part-time or had volunteered to do this. But we have a dozen developers, and we can think now about whether they should be full-time or not. But big opportunity. And then cross the finish line, right? There are lots of things that can delay you. What should the governance be? What should the investment be? Who should control this? All of that. Just figure out how to get a few bots done. And once you do that, you'll learn from that, and that'll be an example for other parts of the agency. So what if you are already past the pilot stage in your evolving program? So one of the things, and I'll show you a diagram in this, is you really have to build your process assessment capabilities. To do a bot, you have to do the best process, but you have to understand all the details of the process. So if you want a significant program, you just don't need bot developers, you need process assessment capabilities. Get a pipeline in place. I think we have around 40 bots or so in our pipeline that we're working on right now, either in the assessment phase or the development phase. Monitor the cost and value. As I said, the first bot's going to cost you a lot, but think about how much you're spending in RPA, and think about the value you're getting out of it. And I think the value, one way we measure it is the hours of work that can be become available, but that's not the only metric. We one of the bots that we did, so we thought about, those of you in government know what receiving reports are. That's when someone that uses a service needs to authorize payment for that service. And we have about 4,000 buildings that we manage. We had building managers, and they have some recurring services they have to pay, like utilities, every month. And to make those payments, they had to provide information to finance, and we told them what they needed to provide. And it turns out that we could automate a lot of that information. The error rate when this was a manual process was close to 20%. With RPA, it's 0. So things like that may not be capturing in our hours. There are other benefits, but overall, the hours of work you can free up is a good metric. There are clearly other benefits. And the IT strategy is very important. You have to have a good relationship with your IT organization. I think IT organizations are concerned about security, and rightfully so, around bots, but they set up a process. We followed that process. It's probably about 24 questions and things we had to go through But when we had that 100-day goal, we worked hard to develop some processes and practices with the IT organization. So over time, this is tremendously important to have an IT organization supporting you that's solution-oriented, and we have that at GSA. So this is what we're building now, and I call this the bot factory. And this is the operating structure, but you see an intake and assessment process that happens outside of the factory. And then within the factory, you see development, testing, operations, and maintenance. So the intake and assessment is where you look at the processes and think about, okay, what would I consider, what would I want to automate? So our process analyst is a Six Sigma guy. He can do process diagrams, he can sit with users. So it's important that you have someone in that role. A functional champion is when we started doing work for other CXOs and other offices, sometimes they're excited and they can move the ball forward. Other times you might go to them, they say, okay, I don't think we have anything. And in other cases, they want to do something, but just the bureaucracy of the organization takes time. So the champion is someone that knows that organization and knows how to get things done and move things along. In our case, it's someone outside the organization, but we've designated them to work with that. So we have a young lady that works with our HR organization and has good relationships with them, and she's our functional champion. And then the business experts are within the business unit themselves. Within the factory, you have to think about the best way to do this. Right now, what we've done is we've had different teams of a couple analysts that work together to develop the bots. Underneath all of this is the information technology, the platform credentialing, and ATOs that need to happen. And then operations and maintenance is also part of the factory. So this is how we operate. What about the management side of it? And the real question here for all of you is, how much autonomy do you give individual programs to build their own bots? And that's a tough one, right? Because I wanted to go build some bots in CFO, so I wouldn't have liked it if I wasn't able to do that. But you have to think about what level of control you have, and some of it depends on the size of your agency. And I think some of the consulting firms have had models like this. This is very similar to that, but the big things you have to think about are the governance, and the policies and the standards, how you evaluate the processes you might want to automate, how you document them, development, testing, operation, maintenance, and IT platform. So the centralized model is, you say there's one central group within the agency that's responsible for all that, along with IT, for the platform. And the business unit is only brought in when you're looking at the process and you need to document it. The second model is coined a federated model. So a federated model is where you have the centralized office responsible for governance and the initial kickoff of the evaluation, but the business unit does everything else. And decentralized is where the business unit does virtually everything. So if you're a huge agency and you have bureaus that are big, decentralized may work. But to get this going, you want to allow enough autonomy to not stifle organizations, but you also need to have some control, and you also don't want organizations starting over. So that's why within GSA, we've got one business unit that is pretty much operating on their own, but the rest of the agency and all the CXOs, we are going to them and saying, okay, let's see what we can do. Let's help you build some bots. Let's help you think about the process. We manage the development. And that's working well. Maybe that model will change as we grow, but right now that's where we are. So this is what's going to happen. So your pilot program, the cost relative to value is going to be much, much higher. As you build, you'll see the costs and the value being in line. And then as you go for those home runs, you'll see the value far exceeding the cost. And I'm not looking at ROI, I'm simply looking at, it cost me this much to build a bot, and this is the kind of return I'll get in a year on that bot. So we're in the third stage right now because we've been able to get up to the 14 bots, which is not a very big number. But we've moved through in less, I guess a little over a year, we've moved through those first two stages. So what about government-wide? What can we do? It's really something that leadership has to think about. I've talked to you about the agencies. I'd like to tell you what I think we can do or will do government-wide. So one of the things that we did last week at GSA is we announced a community of practice for RPA. And this community of practice will be really focused on, we'll have a sense of urgency, it will be focused on rapid deployment. And we'll set a goal. The community of practice is divided into two areas. One is sort of the problem-solving piece, and this is going to be a working group, and we're going to be focused on figuring out solutions that we can share across government. You see in the problem-solving some of the areas that we think about that across all the different agencies, everybody's trying to solve this problem on their own. So we're going to bring everyone together, and we're going to learn from each other and think about the best way to solve this. CIOs across government are thinking about different ways to think about what the IT standard should be and how to manage RPA in their agency. So we will bring a working group that addresses all of these. Another piece of this is to measure the benefit across federal government. So enthusiasm is up here. What are the results? So we're going to ask this group to establish some ways to measure the benefit across government. We're going to do that. And also there are some use cases. We're looking at some that could be shared across government. And we need to do that. We need to share use cases across agencies and really leverage this. As we work through this, we need to share that knowledge. So that'll be done through a playbook. We'll figure some ways out to do some mentoring and also discussion forums. So more to come in the community of practice, but we've announced that and we're in the process of putting it together, and it'll move quickly. It'll be like the progress we made with bots at GSA. So I'm really looking forward to what that group can do and some of the exciting things they can accomplish and how they can bring agencies together. I said they need to set a goal. So here's another back of the envelope calculation. They need to get started. And you all should understand that with a modest investment, you can have a significant impact right now. And the goal that I think is achievable and that we'll ask the COP to consider is $1 billion of capacity achieved by RPA in 2 years. That's and I probably should explain something else to you. In CF organization, we have something called home runs. So home runs don't go in performance plans. Home runs are thinking about things that are significant accomplishments that move the needle. So if you think about baseball, a batter can have a high batting average, a lot of singles and doubles, but you have to identify what the home runs are. And our home runs, I don't put in anyone's performance plan, but I want the organization aspiring to really great things. So I think we just talked about our home run for bots this year, and I told our RPA program manager, I think the home run this year would be 35, not 25. So I don't know if the $1 billion would be considered a home run or not, but we need to aspire to something. And when you think about what it would take, well, today we've got about 500 people at this conference. And we think that a bot, and we're actually seeing averages on the bots that are in our pipeline higher than this, but the average bot will free up a couple $100,000, about 3,000 hours of capacity. So to hit that billion, which would be 14 million hours, you need 5,000 bots. So 500 people, so if each of you get back in the next 2 years, get 10 bots done, we're there. So 10 bots will get us $1 billion. And I just don't know where else we have that kind of potential in federal government to do something like this. I talked about the EOA program that the CFO office launched, the 230,000 hours. If we could do that across the civilian workforce, that's a couple billion. So the numbers the numbers are huge, so we shouldn't be waiting. It's really time to cross the finish line and to get things done. Okay, so I got 5 minutes left. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to take those. Okay, we've got 3.
Hi, Gerald. Hi, Gerald. Chris Niedermeyer with BRMI. Thank you very much. I have a question about how you may be able to repurpose savings from S&E funds to buy software, support services, that sort of thing. Does your appropriations allow you to do that?
Yeah, we've got probably a little more flexibility. We have a working capital fund, so we've got the capability to do that. I can tell you that on the personnel side, to do what we've done so far, we've not added anybody. Just about everybody has done this part-time. On the contracting side, we certainly moved some funds and spent a little bit of money to have some help to get started in the program. Yes?
Good morning. Sorry. Out of curiosity, you mentioned in phase 2 that that's where you implemented both the security and privacy concerns. I was wondering from the IT side of the house, if you could go into a couple of the hurdles or challenges that your teams ended up facing while implementing specifically beyond the pilot program into the 14 current bots you have.
Okay, all right. So I'll answer that question very generally. Join the CLP and you'll learn exactly what the right answer should be. But I mean, the biggest hurdle is the IT organizations don't know how to deal with this, and they're naturally conservative. And if you think about some of the things that we're doing with RPA applications, we're simply extracting data and making it available to users, that they don't have to go out and search and hunt. So the IT organization still wanted us to go through a questionnaire, and I think we've got, I think someone from GSA speaking later at Burroughs that can address that, but it really was getting them to make some decisions, working that through, and by the way, if they were more conservative than we wanted to get the program going, I was fine with that, right? Because they don't know and they have to learn. So so they probably were, and we had to spend some time really documenting what we're doing and showing them what was going on, and anything associated with PII or systems access. Those are the things that you have to pay more attention to. But very general answer, but it was really work with them, get them to make some decisions. They're probably going to err on the side of being a little conservative, and that's okay. Let's get this going.
I was wondering if you had any estimates on total cost of ownership that look at all phases of your process, and also the lease costs, the IT infrastructure costs, the services, the O&M that agencies can take a look at as they embark on this journey.
Yeah, I don't, the costs that, I wanted to get this program started and see what it would take to deliver, right? So I think that once again, within the CLP, we can share some of that information. In industry, I think they say a bot costs $40,000. So that's an average, but the thing you have to think about is the Six Sigma world, right? I redeployed someone from a CPI group into this project. We were already paying for them. They could have worked other projects, but I didn't think I had anything on the table that could have the return that our PA did. So certainly if and that's part of it, if you looked at the cost of doing everything, maybe it would take a little longer to get past the part of the curve where your benefits far exceed your costs, but you're going to get there. I mean, you're talking about paybacks of your investment in the same year. I was more concerned about how much cost outlay I would have to do to start this program. As we now build the factory, that's when the total cost of ownership will come into play. and we're going to think about, okay, how much do we really spend on this? But if we're spending a lot of money, then I just need to make the goal more ambitious, right? We need to get more done. And that's the way it'll work, because this has huge potential.
And just to follow up on that, what would be a good ballpark estimate in terms of an investment for an agency to get started on a pilot and maybe a goal of 10 bots in the first year?
You're probably looking at $500,000 to $1 million. I mean, just rough, right? And understand that what happens when you go to other parts of the organization, and I have leaders that manage hundreds of employees that are off in regions, and you say, okay, I want to reduce your headcount, they don't like that. But when you say, I want you to give up some resources so they can work on something as exciting as RPA, they're in. So it really comes to you're spending the money that you have in your budget more wisely by directing it to RPA. And the economics will be there. I have no concern about that. Okay. Yes.
So you talked in stage 4 of your plan about moving from RPA to intelligent automation. Can you talk a little more about kind of what intelligent automation means to you and your team?
Yeah, so we're so I think that there's lots of enthusiasm for intelligent automation like there is for RPA. We're at GSA, we're more focused on RPA. So I, as a CFO, have not thought about intelligent automation. Within our business units, they are thinking about that. They're thinking about what they need to do. Intelligent automation for agencies like HHS or DoD, there's tremendous potential. I've got so much low-hanging fruit with RPA that we're very focused on what we can do in the RPA environment, because there really is so much. Now some of the bots we've developed can extract information, and they're doing things that are more advanced. But AI, the opportunities in AI, I think are there. I think people are talking about it, but I don't. Today, as a CFO, we're focused on getting the most out of RPA. But other parts of GSA are certainly thinking, doing things on AI.